Hi, this is Charles Kelly. In a dramatic U-turn, the government has extended the ban on tenant evictions by private landlords. Just today, less than a couple of days before the ban was due to come to an end on Sunday. Now, this is amid the fears that charities were warning that up to 250,000 or 240,000 people could be evicted and would lose their home. Now, I personally think that was a bit of an exaggeration, but the fact is thousands of people at least could have lost their homes because the cases were already backing up in the courts. And I think the government could just not afford another big crisis, and they certainly couldn't, were not in the position, certainly local authorities were not in a position to temporarily house, tens of thousands of people being made homeless by private landlords due to the fact that they could not pay their rent during the lockdown and the coronavirus pandemic. So that's what's happened, and this was discussed all this week, but it really is like a last minute thing because it was due to end on Sunday. The courts would have been hearing cases on Monday, and it looks like in most cases renters may also get 6 months notice if their landlord plans to evict them until the end of March. And the block on evictions, now this would include Section 21 notices, Section 8 notices, could have been in courts on Monday, and I'm sure there's thousands of cases backed up in the courts. And the Housing Secretary, whose name is Robert Jenrick, talked of supporting renters over the winter. So we're in summer now, but he's talking about supporting them over winter, adding though, giving landlords some hope that when the ban was lifted, the most serious cases of antisocial behaviour, other crimes and unpaid rent for over a year would be heard first. Well, thank you very much, Robert Jenrick. So he's going to allow, so they're aware that landlords are suffering tenants with antisocial behaviour, crimes and unpaid rent for over a year. And he said, oh yes, we'll hear those first. Well, I don't think that's much of an olive leaf, really. It doesn't give much comfort to landlords who may have antisocial tenants and may have tenants who are just refusing to pay their rents. Now, of course, if tenants are unemployed, they can get help from the government to pay their rent. So long-term unpaid rent shouldn't be a problem, although I'm sure it is because thousands of people could lose their homes. Now, prior to the pandemic, of course, you could just give 2 months' notice, but Wales has already extended to 6 months, and I think Scotland are looking at this as well. So charities like Shelter, of course, have said that more than 170,000 private tenants have been threatened with eviction by their landlord or letting agent, and 230,000 in England have fallen into arrears since the pandemic started. Now, obviously, landlords have got mortgages as well. Landlords have got costs. And Ben Beadle, the chief executive of the National Residents Landlords Association, the NRLA, has said that a blanket extension is unacceptable, especially to so close to the deadline. This announcement satisfies no one. Now, he said that landlords have been left powerless in exercising their legal right to deal with significant arrears, unrelated in some cases to COVID-19 or antisocial behaviour, or extremely disruptive tenants who make life miserable for their neighbours and housemates. I've had one of these myself. I've had a lady tenant who's fine herself, but her boyfriend has been causing a lot of disruption in the house. He's not even a tenant, but he stays there frequently. He was harassing another female tenant, just causing problems for people, even taking people's food out of the fridge in a HMO situation. And I'd actually served a Section 21 notice last year. She ignored that. I served a Section 8 in January, and then the lockdown came, and I can't do anything about that. Having said that, the problem, she seems to have, things have settled down a bit in the house, but still, I was powerless to deal with this disruptive boyfriend causing problems in the house because of this situation. So it is a difficult. I sympathise with tenants who can't pay their rent, But what about landlords who've got mortgages to pay and can't pay their mortgages because they're not getting rent? What about landlords who rely on properties for their retirement income? What are the government doing to help those people? Landlords, it seems, are just almost like second-class citizens now, in terms of the rule changes that have come in, the extra legislation, the red tape that's come in. It's very, very difficult. So landlord groups have called, for more help in England to reduce the financial pressures on landlords, because not all landlords are big companies and mega rich people. The majority of landlords only have one or two properties. Sometimes there are accidental landlords who just can't sell a property, so they've rented it out instead. So it is a difficult situation on both sides. Now, on my page, I'm putting up some advice for tenants from the Citizens Advice Bureau, who give advice for tenants on what to do. A lot of tenants will go to the council if they're threatened with eviction, but the council will always say to them, "Well, don't move, stay where you are until you're actually evicted," putting more pressure on the courts. Now, when we say evicted, it's not even if this tenant ban was not lifted, landlords will still have to apply to courts, will still have to serve notices, then apply to the court if the notices are ignored. So it would have been months anyway before anybody was actually evicted, and the courts were already backed up with thousands of cases. And a lot of these evictions occur because people reach the end of their tenancy and then refuse to move. They say, "Well, I don't care, I've got nowhere to go, so you have to evict me." I've had this before. Whereas normally, if you reach the end of a contract, that's it. You part company. You've rented a place for 6 months or a year, and at the end of that time, why not just leave? But many people don't, and this is why then you would need to start a 2-month process to get people out and to get your house back, even though the tenancy has come to an end. Now, a lot of people say tenants need security and all this, and they need long-term tenancies, but really, that is the job of the government, to provide enough council housing for people who are on low incomes or people who need good, proper social housing. That was never intended for a landlord who may want to rent a house out for a year or two or a couple of years. I mean, some landlords are happy to rent out houses for many years at a time, but really the government needs to build more council homes. There haven't been any major council home building since the new towns were built in the 70s. If you think about places like Milton Keynes, Basildon, Harlow, these were built in the 1970s. And what's been done since then? Nothing. No major council house building programme, apart from a few estates here and there, have been built since the 1970s. That's 50 years of non-building in a major way in terms of new towns, new cities. They're leaving it all to the private sector, and they're looking for a few crumbs from the private sector to give out a few crumbs of affordable housing, which in many cases are non-affordable or on dodgy shared ownership schemes that many people won't qualify for or many people can't afford. And I've seen this in my own area. So the government needs to really get local authorities to start building council houses. And I was a councillor in my local authority. I was on the planning committee. I said, "Why don't you build more council houses?" And you know what the answer was? They said, "Well," the officers now said, "Well, if we build more council housing, people might buy them." What? So you're worried that you house somebody in a council house and then 5 or 10 years down the road they might buy them. What's the difference? They're still in a house. They're not in a hotel being housed at a great expense. They're actually worried that people might exercise their right to buy and buy them. Well, there's obviously an answer for that anyway. They could build modular homes that do not qualify for a mortgage, that would not be able to buy. And in any case, most people in my area could not afford to buy their council house, because by virtue of the fact that they're a council tenant and on a low income, how on earth would they be able to afford a £500,000 or £600,000 house, even with a discount? In fact, the officer told me they get a 60% discount. Well, that's not true. You get a 60% discount up to a certain point. You don't get a 60% discount on the whole £500,000 home. So it's nonsense that councils have in fact, they've sold all their stock to a housing association. Housing associations don't build enough. Councils need to build more social housing. That will solve the housing problem and the housing crisis, not forcing landlords into keeping tenants that don't want to pay rent. Even councils and housing associations evict tenants who don't pay rent. Believe you me, they're no mugs. That if people are not paying rent, they're out, and there's no two ways about it. If they're antisocial behaviour, they're out. So it seems like the private landlords have been stamped on and asked to, now deal with the situation where the government finds itself in, where they haven't got enough social housing, they cannot house enough people if they become homeless, and yet people can sail across the English Channel in a dinghy and they immediately get housed. And that's one of the reasons why I think that they're unable to cope with, tens of thousands of people who may become homeless through non-payment of rent. And yet people, illegal migrants are sailing across the Channel and they get housed in 4-star hotels. I've seen documentaries on this. That some of them are housed in 4-star Hilton hotels where the whole hotel has been taken over by a company called Serco, and they house nothing but asylum seekers. And Serco have got a £2 billion contract to house asylum seekers over the next few years. So that's the situation here. That's the situation. But obviously, this is just a recap on the week. During the week, I reminded people who are self-employed that they can still apply for a grant system, a grant scheme up to £6,000. We also talked about Apple breaking through the $2 trillion barrier. Apple and companies like Apple, Netflix, Amazon, Google and Facebook have all done very well out of this crisis. And people like Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, Mark Zuckerberg have added, between them trillions to their wealth, while many people are in the world are suffering. Their businesses are going under because of continuous changes to the rules, further lockdowns. Now the travel industry is suffering again because of last minute changes to travel plans. People in Spain were stuck and had to come back and then suffer quarantine. Now the latest one is Croatia. That people have gone to Croatia, which wasn't on the sort of coronavirus hit list. Now they've been told you've got 30 hours to either get back to the UK, or when you get back, you're going to have to enter into quarantine. So there's been a lot of issues there. There's been a lot of problems for businesses, and still are. There's still more problems to come. Unfortunately, when the furlough scheme ends, I think there's going to be a lot more people unemployed, and that will lead to more renters getting into arrears and more trouble for landlords. So I'm sorry it's on a damp squib there, but obviously a lot of the news coming through at the moment is bad news, and that's unfortunate. But thanks for listening. I hope you all have a great weekend, and whatever you're doing, stay safe and keep out of trouble, as it were. Hi to Kwa there, Sukunas Kwa, and hi to Shirley up there in Milton Keynes, where we're just talking about that place. Great city, built on a railway line going up north and down into Euston, built on a road network so that it's got all the transport links, unlike some of the developments going on at the moment, which is tacking on bits to existing towns and creating more pressure around the greenbelt and building villages here where people don't want them. We need more Milton Keynes, we need more Harlows and Basildons. They were great, innovative places at the time, dealt with the overspill from London, and have been great successes. So thanks for listening. Have a great evening. This is Charles Kelly bringing you money tips so we save, earn, invest, accumulate and enjoy more money. Thanks a lot. Bye for now.